Niels Bohr famously said, "An expert is a person who has made all the mistakes that can be made in a very narrow field." The very world of science and research is dramatically shifting with the emergence of generative artificial intelligence. With Google's NotebookLM as well as many other tools, do we suddenly have the ability to study the scientist as well as the science?
Welcome to the Grand Challengers Podcast, a show about inspiring individuals who are stepping up to tackle the global challenges that our world is facing in their own unique ways.
This is a special mini-series on Google's NotebookLM, featuring previous guests from the show and insights into the potential and perils of generative AI in science and research.
Join us on not only this little experiment, but also some deeper dives into key topics we have covered on the show so far.
From urban nature-based solutions, climate change, urban planning, ecology, livability, and even perspectives on AI in our urban environment as well.
AI is here to stay, accessing our vast collection of human knowledge, summarizing and synthesizing it, and presenting us with generated words, images, videos, voices, and much more. So join me, Peter Marcus Bach, and my guest on today's episode, Lena Mutzner, on this journey as we explore whether AI can capture the essence of her scientific journey as it condenses her work into a biographical piece. Please enjoy. Welcome back, Lena.
Thank you.
And thanks for agreeing to subject yourself to the AI experiment I've been doing on the Grand Challengers podcast.
Honestly, I'm really curious what you managed to create. And I love to experience this.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward.
Well, I mean, we've had some chats about AI actually since I released the first episode of the mini series. And yeah, it's been top front and center of your mind and how it sort of is going to affect research in future.
Yes. I'm thinking a lot about it. I have also tested the tools that you, for example, suggested. And what they can do is surprising. And how they evolve with time, it's even more scary and surprising. And I cannot even start to understand how they will influence our daily lives and the research.
No,
so, yeah.
So listeners, welcome back to yet another episode on the mini-series. We've had quite a few different experiments so far. This is the series where we see how well a large language model, namely Google's NotebookLM, can explain our work, or in this case, in this episode, your work, back to us. And we spice it up every episode and we do it slightly different because, for science, as we say. But we've had research papers summarized, we've had literature reviews summarized, we've tried to prompt NotebookLM to focus on specific aspects. We have prompted it to completely modify the content to demonstrate the perils of it. In the most recent episode, in the previous episode, we demonstrated how well it can summarize content from a different language into English, and as well as looking at multiple documents. And so on today's episode, we'll be doing yet another experiment, which I think is a very interesting way of using NotebookLM as well. So Lena, what's your prior experience with AI?
So mostly I'm using it just for grammar correction.
Ah.
Yes, this is my most used way. So I have a tool that corrects entire sentences and I'm very happy with it.
Okay.
So this is my best experience. And then I'm using a little bit of ChatGPT to answer me all kinds of questions, to modify abstracts. And then I have also used the NotebookLM, for example, actually to upload German papers. And because I didn't want to read all of those, although I can speak German, but I didn't have time. And then I made it summarize and I asked it some questions.
I guess you share some of the pet peeves I have with German papers or German academia. And that is that I think sometimes, the German language is about what is the longest word you can make and
yes.
What is the longest sentence you can make.
These reports, they're really long and it would take you a lot of time. So I asked it to give me all the summaries. I asked it questions. Yeah. I mean, it was also a kind of a test. I'm not actively using it. I'm still in the testing phase.
Yeah. But I also suppose in relation to what we discussed in your episode, you probably wanted those articles in Swiss German and not High German. So
You know that Swiss German is no official written language, though.
That is true. Although you still see it written on all the ads that I see walking around,
Yeah, I guess you're right. And we actually write a lot in Swiss German in private messages.
Yeah. So, yes, I think your favorite sound in Swiss German is the CH, which is the very throaty type of sound. Yes, that one. Either way, interesting use. And I guess, how do you hope to, use AI in future? Are you experimenting with some new ways of incorporating it into your research work?
So I really hope it helps us with the entire writing and also understanding what is the state of research. I think there we spend way too much time finding out what others did, for example. There's so many papers out there. How can we read them? How can we digest them? How can we even understand their data? And AI would be perfect, right? We don't have to do this work. So now it's so much work to write a research proposal, just the part where you start to understand what is the background. Or for PhD students, start to understand the background. And this work can be probably done by AI. Currently, my tests say it starts to be possible, but you have to be very careful about the biased views. And I actually also tested it to give me like future research directions. And then you see that it's not creative.
It's not creative.
Yes, because the future research directions will be copied of what it finds.
Yeah.
So the creativity is limited to the outlook of the papers.
Interesting. Okay.
Which is clear. How can it invent something new that is not written somewhere?
Yeah.
And there is where our contribution comes in. We have, like, the AI could digest all of it for us, summarize it, make nice graphs, understand the content, but then we have to decide what is the best research to do, right? And so we can save a lot of time. Probably could also write our papers. Question is, do we need papers if the AI writes the paper?
Well, that's, I guess, one question. The other question is the ethical part of it. Do you believe that it's right to have an AI write our paper as long as we're responsible for the content in the end? Or, should it be considered an AI paper, not our paper?
I mean, I meant more, you analyze the data. You say how to analyze the data.
Yeah.
And it only needs to write about it. And we do the more complex discussion part.
Yeah.
But it could compare it to other research. Why not? This value is similar to that one. Then I would find it, I don't know if it's ethical, but it would be practical.
The uncanny valley. I mean, those are a lot of questions, I think, what researchers, but also so many other professions are grappling with at the moment, that who knows what the future holds. I mean, it's comparable to, we see this lately, a lot of these memes on the internet, but there's one very famous article from, 1800s. So I might be misquoting the year here, but it was when school teachers and mathematicians were telling people to not use calculators. And that was when the calculator was first invented. And today it's just commonplace to have a calculator. Yes, we do some math problems without, but having a calculator seems to be very normal nowadays.
Yes. As long as you don't lose your critical thinking, which I think we need to train even more for. I think the options are really unlimited, and I don't know how we can use it. I also fear that the AI might become dumb, like be reproducing their own content.
So you think it ends up in this vicious cycle, an endless loop of interpolation, and it then sort of converges onto the same content over and over again?
Yes, because if you imagine, more and more of the content in the internet is produced by AI.
That's an interesting thought.
It doesn't have any inspiration. It doesn't have any creativity. So then it will actually kill itself.
I guess the human is still very essential in the whole picture of things, because using AI as our maybe assistant or co-pilot, as they say, allows us to still invent new things, be creative, think critically, but then do it much faster. So the richness of the content sort of stays the same, if not increases.
Yeah. I think, well, I'm not really an expert on AI. As you can hear, I use it for my language correction mostly, but it inspires me. And I think, I want to look into it. And I also see that you use it a lot for graphic design.
Yep.
And there, the potential obviously is huge.
The potential is definitely very huge. I think communicating visually is super important, but also, I guess, attracting people to the content as well. Graphic design, I'm not the expert there. I do understand a bit, but I think from my limited understanding, I feel that it makes a huge difference when you prompt an AI to generate an image in a certain way, using certain colors, and you give it instructions that a graphic designer would, compared to if you had zero knowledge. I think the results are night and day. Definitely.
Yes, especially for researchers where sometimes it's maybe difficult to communicate our results in an effective way. And then we are still experts and we want the output in a certain way. But how do you explain it to a graphic designer that I don't know about pollutants and all these things? So then this is like a nice tool.
Yeah. For listeners who may not have noticed, the recent cover change of the podcast was actually assisted with AI. So I used 2 different AI tools to generate the new cover of the podcast. One I had to use to refine how I look because ChatGPT clearly didn't remember how I looked from the picture I gave it. Either way, shall we get into the experiment?
Yes, I'm very curious what it's going to produce.
All right, so how it works is we have now given NotebookLM quite a lot of documents this time. So in the previous episode, we gave it around 8 different publications. This time, I have given NotebookLM 13 of your journal papers, all in English. And so we'll put an extensive list of this. And it's a lot of the topics that we discussed on your main episode of the podcast. In addition to that, because we wanted to, change things up a bit, I have also given NotebookLM your CV. So with 13 of your publications and the CV, clearly your name is quite prominent within all the information. So I told NotebookLM, why not give me a summary where they focus on you, Lena, as the person and your work. So think of this as a biographical piece. But I'd like to also hope that it's a nice summary of the work that you do and the breadth of the work that you do. And I've also asked it, as it's been a very popular element of all the previous episodes of the mini-series, to use analogies to explain many of these complex concepts around water quality, micropollutants, contaminants of emerging concern, and how we go about monitoring, modeling, and managing these different pollutants.
So basically it makes a summary of my entire professional research life today.
Yes. So I guess you will have to try and evaluate how good it captures the essence of you and your work and your person and how well it does it in 11 minutes, because that is actually what I got from it. It's the shortest summary from NotebookLM so far on this show. But
I wonder if my work is so clear or if it's almost depressing that it only got 11 minutes.
Well, it's actually, I can also generate another one and we'll see what the statistics are of different lengths. But I thought it's a nice challenge to see how well it does it. In episode 4, we listened to a Gemini summary of a single paper in 8 minutes, and that was very good. So short doesn't necessarily mean bad. Short can mean extremely good at distilling information, which I think AI, as you've mentioned, would be really useful for.
Yeah.
So maybe we can't really summarize 13 papers in one go, and to summarize all of your work, I think that's what your main episode is for. So listeners, you can check out the most recent main series episode for more on Lena's work. But perhaps tell me, what are your expectations? What are perhaps some of the key highlights of your work that you're hoping that NotebookLM, or shall I say Martha and Stuart, as we've named them, are going to touch upon?
So I really hope that it grasps how I evolved in my research over time. Like I started, as we talked about in the main series, with passive sampling, really deep with monitoring, thinking about the techniques. And I feel I evolved over time, broadening up with looking at more different pollutants, looking more at catchment scales, blue-green systems. So maybe getting on the impact side. So I really hope that it sees that I'd evolved in my career and that one day I will have this enormous impact on water quality. So I hope it captures me as this kind of evolving person.
Okay. No, that's a fair point. I think, the dates are all written in all these publications and your CV has a lot of chronological information. So hopefully it touches upon that and uses that in its summary and analysis. But other than that, are you ready to listen to this live reaction?
Yes. I'm a little nervous.
I was going to say, you're sounding a bit nervous.
Yeah, I am. Oh.
Well, let's see what NotebookLM has produced. So Martha and Stuart, take it away.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we basically do the reading so you sound smart. And today, we're looking not just at the science, but at the scientist.
Yeah, exactly. We're diving into Lena Mutzner's work. She's really digging into some, pretty critical questions about our cities and, the water flowing through them. It's all based on scientific papers she's co-authored.
Right. And Lena's work, it's really about that interface, isn't it?
Huh?
Where, urban life meets water. You could almost picture our cities as these, giant organisms, maybe. constantly shedding tiny particles into their watery veins and arteries.
Whoa. That's a good way to put it. And those particles, those crumbs, as you said, are micropollutants. So our sources today are these research papers where Lena's been a key figure in trying to get a handle on this.
I mean, 2 comments, right?
Yeah.
It's nice that they call me a key figure. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy about it that I'm having such a high impact. A little shocking how they framed it with these giant cities and then they called it particles. And obviously I'm not happy about this.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
To be very specific, you work with dissolved pollutants.
Yes. So these are not particles. I guess as an analogy, it's maybe good enough. So yeah.
I was going to say analogy failure, actually, because you're then telegraphing the wrong message. We're not talking about particulate pollutants, which would be sediments.
Yes. I mean, really, all my research is really always focusing on dissolved stuff. Yeah. So it's wrong, right? But it's nice. What was it? A giant organism. A giant organism. Did they call it my cities? In her cities?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just
their cities?
In cities, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I thought they said even my cities. Made me even more important.
Yeah. So, we're focusing on the scientists, not the science. I think that was a very nice intro.
Yeah.
But I like the level of irony at the start. It's like where we do the distilling, so you don't have to.
So it means my work is super complex and they even failed in the distilling as I'm not even looking at particles.
Let's see what else they have to say.
Okay, so our mission, our deep dive today, is to really get to know Lena Mutzner's contribution here. We want to unpack her work so it's clear, maybe even raise an eyebrow or two in a good way, and move you thinking, okay, that is interesting. Ready to jump in.
Let's do it. So Lena Mutzner, she's really focused on this hidden chemical cocktail, the stuff that shows up in urban runoff and particularly in sewer overflows when it rains heavily.
Okay.
It's like she's got a magnifying glass aimed right at the city's plumbing during a storm.
Totally. And one really clever angle she's explored is this model-based screening.
Okay.
It's for finding these critical wet weather discharges. Maybe think of it like trying to find the worst pollution spots in a massive city grid.
Yeah.
But you can't possibly visit every single street corner, right? So Lena's work is kind of like building this super smart map, this GPS maybe, that flags the likely trouble zones based on different bits of data.
So more analogies. I think if I prompted it explicitly for analogies, then it likes to go overboard. So, but it's interesting. You're getting lots of different ways of communicating your work.
Yes, and I think it was communicated very well, and it's correct mostly, right?
Yeah.
And actually, before I said, I wanted to start with the monitoring, but now I had forgotten this early paper, which was actually this model-based screening, which was my first paper. So it starts...
So chronologically speaking, it started in the right place.
Yes, just topic-wise, it belongs... Not, like this was an early work, but then later I did only monitoring. But it cannot understand this, I guess.
Well, I guess it chose to sort of tell your story chronologically. And in a way that sometimes says that it might miss the big picture. Maybe if you prompted it differently, if you said sort of focus on the whole story or the big picture of pollution management, it might take a different route.
Yes. We don't know how it's going to go on, but here it started just chronologically with the first paper that then fits way better with later papers, right? Yeah. So let's see what happens. I'm curious. But it helps me maybe to communicate more effectively with these ideas. And I think it was really nice to how they talked about the spatial distribution problem that we had discussed before, right? Saying you cannot measure at every street corner. I said, it's not 3 corners we measure, but...
The idea is there.
Yes.
I think people understand the visual of street corner. I think it's just a matter of now changing the context. In your case, it's much larger distances.
Yes, but like they said also in the city grid. So I think it was nicely actually put. I think that's understandable.
Yeah. So get your magnifying glass ready and your chemical cocktail.
Yes.
Pretty neat.
It really is. And the bits of data, the clues are the substances themselves. So she looked at things like triclosan.
Oh, yeah, the antibacterial stuff.
Exactly. From, soaps, personal care things. It's like that one ingredient in your bathroom cabinet that just doesn't really break down easily. It lingers.
Right. And then there's glyphosate.
The herbicide, yeah. Glyphosate. You might think farms primarily, but actually...
It's in the city, too.
Oh, yeah. urban gardens, maybe weed control in other areas. And here's something that grabs your attention. The WHO, the World Health Organization, has flagged it as probably carcinogenic.
Whoa, okay. Ooh. That's like finding a slightly alarming ingredient listed on your favorite snack all of a sudden.
Kind of, yeah. And she also looked into mecoprop that's used for protecting plants and materials, and copper.
Copper seems like it would be everywhere.
It is. Think about it. Old roofs, gutters, even tiny bits wearing off car brake pads. It all slowly dissolves and washes away into the drains when it rains.
Amazing.
That was we tried to do this on your episode.
But they did it better.
They did it better? You think so?
Yeah.
I'm going to lose my job as a podcaster soon.
No, but was all this information really in the papers? Like that it was flagged by the WHO? Maybe it's written somewhere, right? It must be.
I mean, so to explain it again, so NotebookLM is designed to work with the sources it's given. That doesn't mean that it's only relying on those sources. It can draw from other information, I believe, because it's powered by Gemini 2.5.
I thought it can only draw from those sources.
I am not entirely sure. Sometimes you don't hear much, but listeners, if you know more, please do drop me a note on social media, leave a comment on this episode so that we better understand the inner workings of it. But as far as I know, it does have reliance on outside information. It just is trained to not hallucinate. And we saw this in episode 4 when I completely changed the content. We had zero information about Dutch culture in our paper, yet NotebookLM was able to tell a coherent story about it. So I think it has access to outside information.
Yeah, you must be right. And the information it gave about the pollutants, I mean, I cannot remember this full paper. I feel it was not all in there, and it was really good what it did.
Yeah. Very nice summary. It did mention a pollutant we did forget to cover on your episode, personal care products.
The triclosan.
Exactly.
But we had diclofenac.
Yeah, we had diclofenac. So, I think we did better there. We captured that. Maybe they'll mention it. Who knows?
Yes, let's see.
Okay, so you got all this stuff washing around, and it ends up in these wet weather discharges. Now, we're not talking a gentle trickle here, are we?
No, definitely not. Think more like the system getting overloaded. We're talking about combined sewer overflows, or CSOs,
right,
and stormwater outlets, SWOs. Basically, when you get heavy rain, the sewers, which often carry both rainwater and wastewater,
they just can't cope.
Exactly. Like too many people trying to exit a stadium through one gate after a big game.
Oh, wow.
CSOs are like the emergency exits opening up, releasing that excess mix, water, sewage, pollutants directly into rivers or lakes.
Yikes. And SWOs?
SWOs are more like the rainwater running straight off the streets, pavements, roofs, picking up whatever's there and discharging directly into waterways. Less diluted, perhaps.
Gotcha. Okay, so Lena's models looked at these CSOs and SWOs. What did she find?
I wonder how long they are going to talk about this first paper, just at this stage. How many minutes do we already have? 3?
We are 3.5 minutes into this.
It's a lot for one paper. It was really nice. We laughed about this football stadium.
Yeah.
Right? It was nice. We had never thought about it.
It's an interesting analogy because I know transport experts, researchers, they tend to model human movement flows with similar principles as, fluid dynamics of water. So because they look at emergency evacuation and how you can control the flows and keep people safe. So very similar concepts, similar parallels that you can draw. And to use that as an analogy here and then to sort of say the emergency doors, they swing open. That's very interesting.
Yes, it is. It is. I haven't thought about it. So that's a good idea. Then there was, I felt like this SWO, the stormwater outlets, right? It was explained really fast for people maybe that didn't know what it was. Like it sounded like they would read it from the paper.
Interesting.
I'm not sure, but like in the paper we always read CSO is that and that, SWO is that and that. Yeah. It sounded like a repetition of what we always write in the paper.
Yeah, I guess there's some, call it boilerplate text that you tend to put in a lot of these urban drainage papers. I certainly know some of them like, urbanization is terrible because it increases runoff, basic stuff.
Yeah, exactly this stuff. And did you hear, I'm not sure, but did they say that the stormwater runoff would be less diluted?
I did hear that. But that's not always the case, is it?
Yeah, if you think about wastewater as a way to dilute stormwater, then yes. But that's probably not what we would usually think, right? Wastewater is heavily polluted.
Yeah.
So then we would rather assume that the stormwater is diluting the wastewater.
Yeah.
I think they said this,
but
right?
I think maybe they use that in the context of stormwater not being as polluted, and maybe that's why they use the word diluted in a more colloquial sense, but they're not scientifically accurate here, I guess.
It could be. I was it was really fast, and I was like, oh, but this seems to be wrong.
They're certainly on a roll. I'm having trouble stopping this recording as we listen in.
Let's see.
So let's see if they stick on your first paper or whether they start moving on.
Yeah. It's long for one paper.
But I'm curious. So this was all from one single paper that you've worked on. Okay. So let's see what happens next.
This is where it gets interesting, right?
It really does. Because you might instinctively think, okay, the pesticides, glyphosate, mecoprop, they must be the big problem, right? Exceeding environmental limits.
Yeah, that would be my guess.
Well, the models, looking across numerous Swiss towns and cities, actually suggested that generally glyphosate and mecoprop didn't exceed the environmental quality standards, the EQS, that often.
Wait, really? Hold on. So the weed killer wasn't the main headline act in terms of exceeding these limits?
Not in terms of frequency of exceedance in these models, no. It was copper and triclosan that popped up way more often as exceeding their specific EQS.
Wow.
For copper, the models indicated EQS exceedances at a high percentage of these discharge points for a median duration of about 19 days per year.
19 days.
And for triclosan, coming mainly from those CSOs, the combined overflows, it was around 10 days per year on average.
Okay, that is surprising. It sort of flips the narrative a bit, suggesting maybe our everyday chemicals, the stuff from indoors or from city infrastructure, might be causing more frequent limit breaches in wet weather than some pesticides.
Precisely. It's a really significant finding from Lena Mutzner and her colleagues.
Yeah, I mean, as we said, it's based on this one paper, and it really depends which pollutants you look at, right? Yeah. And it was the case for this specific pollutants. Then they discuss it quite in detail, right? These results that they were very, very case specific. And we cannot conclude that then the indoor pollutants are always the problem, right?
Well, they clearly thought that was a very important paper. I do know they talk about the other stuff eventually, but you do make an interesting point. It's choice to focus on certain sources more than the others. And perhaps it's doing this with your first author papers. Maybe it's going to focus a lot more on the first author papers compared to the others. But who knows what's going to happen?
Yes. Let's see.
Because it challenges where we might be putting most of our monitoring focus.
So how do you even start to predict where these copper and triclosan hotspots might be without testing everywhere?
Well, that ties back into the modeling and this thing called the urban index.
Urban index.
Yeah, it's basically a ratio. How much of an area is built up, paved, permeable versus how much is natural green space. And Lena's research suggests this index could be a decent proxy, a clue.
Oh.
Especially for finding those critical discharge points for triclosan and copper, the more concrete jungle.
The higher the risk of these specific pollution hotspots. Jungle.
That seems to be the indication, yeah.
Why are you annoyed?
Yeah, so this was this urban index was a way to define how urbanized an area is.
Okay.
And to say if it's more urban, then there is more pollution. And it was a small part of the paper. We have never reused this concept.
Yeah.
And it's still the same paper.
Yeah.
And now they focus on this copper and triclosan, which is also the only pollutants that I ever looked at that are more particulate, particle bound. And I never worked with them again. I'm frustrated. And this urban index,
Martha Stewart, you're disappointing us. Come on, you can do better than that.
Yes, it's not holistically seen over my whole career or research.
So
very important so far. Very important concept.
We're only 5 minutes in. It could still salvage it.
We have still 6 minutes left.
I know.
And they will manage.
Oh, hopefully. Let's see.
More hard surfaces means less soaking into the ground and more rapid runoff carrying these substances into the system when it rains hard.
Makes sense, like a less absorbent sponge, basically. Okay, now what about the difference between the two types of outlets, the CSOs, combined overflows, and the SWOs, the stormwater ones? Did her work shed light on that?
It did, and it adds another layer of complexity. For the substances mobilized mainly by rainfall, so think mecoprop, glyphosate, and copper washing off surfaces.
Right.
The stormwater outlets, the SWOs, actually appeared more critical on a national scale in Switzerland when measured in toxic units.
Toxic units. Sounds ominous.
It's just a way to measure potential harm. It combines the concentration of a chemical with its known toxicity level. So even if the total annual amount of, say, glyphosate coming out of CSOs was larger,
the concentration from the SWOs during rain events could be more potent, more acutely toxic.
Exactly. It's like sometimes a small, really concentrated shot of something can have a bigger immediate impact than a larger volume that's more diluted.
I'm thinking of like when you go to the supermarket, you can buy these ginger shots. They're highly concentrated shots to, I guess, wake you up or jolt your system.
They are highly effective. And I think I laughed because these toxic units, now we mostly call it risk quotient. And only in this paper we use this. It's still the same paper.
It's still the same paper.
It's still the same paper. And this is why I laughed, because it's just the next chapter in the paper. And it makes me, like, this paper is from 2016, I believe. And it makes me remember this paper. And I was like, toxic units. Oh yeah, that was like something we used back then.
This is interesting.
Yeah. It seems, did you upload it first, or it's just chronologically first?
So you just drag all the files into NotebookLM in one go. And so I'm currently there, and it says 14 sources, and the summary you get. So in NotebookLM, you can get a quick summary of all the sources. And it says, these documents discuss micropollutants in urban water systems, particularly focusing on wet weather discharges from combined sewer overflows and separate stormwater outlets. Research highlights that wet weather events are significant contributors of micropollutants to aquatic environments and emphasizes the temporal and spatial variability of these contaminants. And it goes on a bit more, but I think this is the summary you get from a whole range of sources.
I agree, and this is usually how it works. Maybe it goes on, and I mean, some of the things that were discussed in this paper are quite holistic, right? Mm-hmm. Because we looked at entire Switzerland, and it was a modeling, and it was assessing some pollutants. So it transfers to a lot of the later work, but like, as I said, I had to laugh because of these toxic units that were never used again.
And it has since been updated. And
now
risk quotients, as you said.
Yes, yeah, right. And there are different papers calling it risk quotients.
Yeah. So let's see whether they can still, I guess, redeem themselves.
Yes, let's see.
Come on, don't fail me now, Martha Stewart.
Think a tiny drop of super hot chili sauce versus a whole bowl of mild salsa.
Or the ginger shot.
Yeah.
That's a really important distinction. You mentioned Lena's team used a dynamic substance flow analysis model.
That's still the first paper.
It's still the first
quite
paper?
sophisticated, but the idea is, logical. It tries to simulate how these pollutants build up on surfaces during dry periods.
Like dust and grime accumulating.
Kind of, yeah. Chemical accumulation, and then how they get washed off and transported through the system when it rains. So it's not just a static picture.
Right. It's capturing the ebb and flow, the dynamics. More like watching a movie of the pollution rather than just looking at a single photo.
That's a great analogy for it.
And I remember reading something about passive sampling in her work, too.
Oh, my God.
Sounds less high-tech.
It is, but it's clever. Passive sampling is basically a cost-effective way to monitor for these micropollutants, especially in places like sewer overflows where continuous monitoring is tricky and expensive.
They called passive sampling clever, so I'm happy.
Okay, so they're starting to redeem themselves.
But the transition, it was not very good.
It was so abrupt.
Yeah, they didn't get why passive sampling then, it's pretty obvious, right? We can model, but we need to understand if the model is right, and then we should measure.
Yeah.
So, but this was just and there is also passive sampling.
But they're going to build it up now, hopefully.
I guess they will, yes. And as I said, clever, so that's good.
So you're happy just because they call passive sampling clever and that's it?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Let's see what comes.
Let's see what comes.
So how does it work?
You place these special devices, samplers, in the water flow, and over time, they just sort of soak up the pollutants that pass by, like putting out a chemical sponge or maybe a sticky trap.
Oh, okay.
It gives you an average concentration over the deployment time, helping researchers identify which overflow points might be consistently hotter than others without breaking the bank. Lena's work highlighted its usefulness for screening.
Neat trick.
Breaking the bank is a figure of speech.
I never heard it. What does it mean?
And not overspending or spending too much money.
Yeah, okay.
Cost effectiveness. Yeah.
I agree. These sewer overflows should not break the bank.
Yes. I think they often use a piggy bank and a hammer and to illustrate the visual aspect of this figure of speech.
Mm-mm.
So it helps find the areas needing more attention.
Precisely. And another thing her research really emphasized is the variability. It's huge.
Variability in what sense?
In the concentrations of these micropollutants, they can change dramatically within a single rainstorm.
Like higher at the beginning, maybe. The first flush.
Sometimes, yeah. The first flush effect is a known phenomenon, but it also varies a lot between different rain events and obviously spatially between different overflow locations across the city.
Come on, admit it, you listened to it and you got inspired for the main series for the first flush.
Actually, no.
It's so funny that they come up with this first flush because I'm not sure if it's written somewhere.
Actually, to be fully transparent, I didn't get this far.
Good.
I listened about 6-7 minutes in.
Okay, so then it's really nice that it's like repeating our discussion from before.
It's kind of nice that it's giving that summary, yeah. And I checked the end of it as well to make sure that it ended properly. Because
yes.
NotebookLM has this habit of generating something and then sometimes stopping half of a sentence. So
it's not so nice. Yeah, okay, so it's got something about the first flush. Nice.
And I think the variability across all the different events, I think that was also yet another study that you did, right? Or is that this paper on passive samplers?
No, yeah, it is in there too. And there's also a paper that I was a co-author of that studies this in more detail from Vivian Fuhrer. So there's several papers probably that look at the temporal or spatial resolution or dynamics. The first flush is not discussed so much, but sometimes.
It's mentioned from time to time, but I guess they see it as an element of water quality, something that I think if it corroborates it with its database or its knowledge base, it will know that that's popped up multiple times in the research across decades, as we said in your main episode. Let's keep going.
So the chemical soup is constantly changing its recipe.
It's a soup.
You got it. It depends on the weather patterns, what people are doing, maybe recent applications of things like pesticides or cleaning products. It's complex, like the city breathing out different chemicals at different times.
Which makes modeling and monitoring even more challenging, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, one finding that stuck out to me was that land use alone, whether an area was residential, commercial, industrial, wasn't a super strong predictor of the micropollutant levels and the overflows. Why would that be?
Yeah, that's a really crucial point Lena's work touches upon. It suggests it's not just what the land is used for, broadly speaking, but how chemicals are actually used within those areas.
So the specific activities and habits.
Exactly. Things like how often people use certain personal care products, gardening habits, car maintenance practices. Those specific usage patterns seem to be more influential than just saying, this is a residential zone. It adds another layer of difficulty in predicting hotspots.
I see a look of satisfaction on your face.
Yeah, I'm happy about this. I don't know if this was one of, they sell it as a very big finding, right?
Yeah.
You could also say it's obvious, but I also have to say that was one assumption that we wanted to prove or not prove, right? It would be really practical if you could say, residential areas, they're always higher on XY, and the urban commercial centers are really high on this and that. And to model it would be perfect. And then all my passive sampling over a lot of locations showed it's not possible. So in a way, it was the goal of my entire PhD to find this, and it was not possible. So I guess I'm happy that they mentioned this.
I should probably also say, thinking about this now, it's 14 documents. It's actually not only journal papers. I did throw your entire PhD thesis into it as well. Which listeners, if you're interested, you can download. It's available for download on ETH's repository. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Yes, please read it. But the PhD thesis is mainly the papers, right?
Usually,
but it has some conclusions and introduction that is a little wider.
But that might explain why it focused so much on the first part, because it would have appeared, or certain elements would have appeared double, maybe.
Yeah, but the passive sampler is then also double.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know, but the first part would be double. You're right.
Yeah, we'll see what else it has left to say, and then we can, I guess, check if our assumptions are correct or not. Let's keep going. I'll go back a bit.
Those specific usage patterns seem to be more influential than just saying, this is a residential zone. It adds another layer of difficulty in predicting hotspots.
So trying to guess someone's diet just by knowing their address. You need to know what they actually buy and cook.
Perfect analogy. And finding that copper and triclosan were often the bigger issues, frequency-wise, really highlights this. These aren't tied neatly to one type of land use. They're more linked to general urban living and infrastructure. That's a core insight from Lena's contribution.
Very interesting. And she didn't just focus on the pollutants themselves, right? She also looked at data in a broader sense for water management.
That's right. Her involvement in reviewing data-driven approaches shows a wider perspective, thinking about how we can leverage all this information, all this data we collect, to make smarter, more efficient decisions about managing our urban water systems overall, using data to become better stewards of our water.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together. If you had to give our listeners the main takeaway from this deep dive into Lena Mutzner's work, what would it be?
I think the key takeaway is that Lena Mutzner's research really eliminates this often invisible world of micropollutants lurking in our city's water systems during wet weather. She's shown us, through modeling and monitoring insights, that perhaps unexpected substances like copper and triclosan, coming from diverse urban sources, frequently exceed environmental standards.
More often than some pesticides, according to the models.
Right, and that both CSOs and SWOs play critical, though sometimes different, roles in releasing these pollutants. Her work also points towards more practical ways to screen for problems, like using that urban index or passive sampling, because we simply can't monitor everything, everywhere, all the time. It fundamentally helps us rethink urban water quality issues.
Yeah, that finding about copper and triclosan definitely sticks with you. It challenges assumptions.
I cannot take it.
It doesn't just stick with her, it sticks with you.
Like, I'm the researcher that did a lot of copper and triclosan research. It was only in one paper, in one model. I have no clue about this. Oh, that's hard.
Hang in there.
Yeah, I will make it.
We have about half a minute to go.
Oh, good. Let's see what else.
It absolutely does. It prompts a closer look at our everyday urban environment as a source.
Okay, so here's something for you, our listener, to chew on. Knowing that these chemicals, copper, triclosan, pesticides, and others, are washing off our cities and into our rivers and lakes, sometimes at levels exceeding quality standards. What does that mean? What are the potential ripple effects on the environment, aquatic life, and maybe even eventually on us? And how can the kind of insights Lena Mutzner provides about monitoring and management help us navigate this? Makes you think about the connection between our daily lives and the health of our waterways, doesn't it? Thanks for diving deep with us today.
And see you next time for more copper and triclosan.
Research. I have a lot to share about those. No, that's so sad.
Okay. I'll let you recover.
Yeah, no, but please. I always felt a little bad, that it was I actually did this in my master thesis and then worked a little more on it in my PhD, and it was really the starting point of everything. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know much about pollutants, and then I chose the ones that was already some data on, and it was copper and triclosan because they're critical. But actually they're mostly, as I said, they're complex and particle bound, so it's difficult to model them. Yeah. And there was always a little bit why did I choose those? And now, my entire biographical research career is based on these two, according to this podcast.
So your past is coming back to haunt you.
Yes. I actually wanted to hide this. I didn't want people to know about this.
And that's a very interesting thought here, because it's okay, this is the first generation with this prompt. Can this prompt be changed? Of course, you can go now and iterate. If you're not happy with this, you can say, focus less on copper and triclosan and more on, say, some of the other pollutants we discussed in your episode 6-PPT quinone, for example.
And basically also maybe remove this paper. Not remove it, but put the focus less on this paper, because I feel 80% of the series was on this paper. Although, you uploaded, for example, way more
there
papers.
There were 14 sources.
And passive sampler papers, there are several. At least 3 papers first author on passive sampling. Yep. So
it's interesting to see that despite 14 sources in your CV, this one iteration, and I must say, we have to be very aware that whenever we generate something with AI, there is a certain level of randomness there. So every iteration you're going to get will sound different.
So if you press the button again, we might hear only about passive samplers.
We might hear only about passive samplers. We might hear more about your journey. And this is not the first time I've done a biographical podcast with NotebookLM. I have done that in the past, and I have listened. And some examples focus more on the person and where they've moved. Others have focused more broadly on a lot of the research. So every generation you get is going to be different. And I think, listeners, this is a very key, important element about how we still need the human in the AI story. Because, Lena, if you were looking at generating something that people can listen to about your work, you would, of course, then curate the content to make sure that it suits what you would like people to be informed about. But anyone else using it to do the exact same thing, to learn more about you, might only get part of the story. And I think that's a very important point to emphasize.
Yeah, it seems pretty biased, or it shows a very selected slice of what I'm doing. I mean, it promoted it pretty well, and my work sounds really good, but please don't focus only on copper and triclosan now in the future water pollution research.
Lena Mutzner, the expert in the world on copper and triclosan.
Yes. Oh, no, yeah, so probably many iterations are needed to create something and to prompt it to maybe something useful. In general, I think, it's amazing that like someone not familiar with me or the topic could listen to something and learn about me. It actually didn't mention much about my CV. I feel it might not have even considered anything in my CV. Did you?
I double checked it, and all sources were selected in the generation of
They were used?
Yeah, should have been.
But what did they use for my CV? Like, they didn't even say, did her PhD at EAWAG or anything, right?
It's an interesting observation.
Yeah, so it's focused really on the contribution of my work, which I think is nice, right? If you talk about a researcher that you say, what impact did they have in the world? I'm maybe not so happy about the impact it thought I had in the world. I don't know how it came up with this. It feels like it was lazy and just read one paper. It's like we do it, right? You want to summarize someone's work and then you read one paper.
Mimicking the human researcher all of a sudden.
Yes.
Oh, no. Not they say, do as I say, not as I do, right?
Yeah. So all the benefits we could have from this, like really summarizing everything, it was not, they didn't manage. Maybe this is why it's only 11 minutes, because then it like got overloaded or...
Maybe. But I guess something that, as we say in science, future work will explore how this can be improved. And I think time will tell. And it might be interesting to see how we can improve the prompting and how many generations it might take to get a biographical piece from NotebookLM that actually is a biographical piece and covers all the material with equal consideration.
Yes, it's going to be interesting. And Peter, will it then replace you?
I don't know. I'd like to hope not from what we've heard today. And I'm sure you wouldn't want someone here talking about your expertise in copper and...
triclosan.
Yes. Okay. Disappointments aside, what did you think about the analogies? Because that was the other half of the prompt.
Yes, you're right. I had forgotten about this. I think they were mostly really good, sometimes not fully fitting, but this is just if you want to be scientifically very exact.
Yeah.
If you just think about how can you maybe explain complex concept to someone, I think they were really good and I should steal them.
Yeah. What was your favorite one?
I don't know, it's typical like this complex cocktails.
Yeah.
There was the complex soup, but the
recipe that keeps changing. Yeah.
Yes, true. I have to think
stadium.
about it. The stadium was really nice, but there were other ones.
The city shedding its particles. Probably not your favorite.
The giant. It was a giant organism shedding particles. No.
Yes.
That was maybe a little over the board.
Yeah.
This one, it was a giant organism. I think it made me think of like this huge spider. Or, like a huge thing. Oh.
Very ominous.
No. But I felt they were mostly accurate. We also had these street corners where I was first unhappy. Yep. But then I said, actually, it's good image for distributed.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think it uses concepts that that most people in the audience can relate to. Yeah, because I guess, if you talk about the Swiss landscape and how Swiss cities look like, then maybe it's not as relatable. But if you just say, hey, a city grid, we see lots of illustrations of that, people can relate to it.
Yeah, it's true. Then I think, Stuart, did you call him Stuart? Martha and
Stuart, yes.
Yeah, so Stuart used more of the analogies, and she sometimes then commented on it. So it made it a little obvious.
It's strange because since we dubbed them, we've noticed Stuart has been the one to do all the analogies and Martha's been the one that actually takes the content more seriously.
Yes. Interesting.
Yeah. Apart from the fact that it only focused on one paper in that much detail and then mentioned the others in passing, but accuracy of the content, you would say, was
mostly fine.
Yeah.
It was sometimes going into too much detail. I feel like, why would you relate to a certain result in this way? But it was accurate.
Yeah.
Did we find like particles maybe in the beginning?
That's the analogy.
Yeah, you're right. It was I was thinking more scientifically, but you're right.
I guess your bigger concern was how much it was elevating or inflating the importance of certain things that, in your opinion, should not actually be seen as that important, like the urban index.
Exactly, like certain concepts or certain aspects were really, really focused on a lot, and then if you listen to it, you would assume this is really an important concept, and maybe not, or maybe we have not tested it.
Yeah.
But it was accurate, I think. Did I find? Yeah. It was not wrong, so that's good.
Yeah. So I guess that's important for us to remember. In terms of content, sure, NotebookLM can summarize it, but I think what really is missing still is that higher level thinking of knowing what actually is the most relevant thing to focus on and what isn't. And I think maybe the large language model sort of treats it. If it's written, it's important, rather than, how often something is repeated or how often it is featured, or just, again, corroborating that information with what it knows, such as the risk quotient, which is now what we would call these assessments. What term did it use?
Toxic units.
Toxic units.
It was used. Sometimes it's used, but it's more rare. And I'm surprised. So what you were saying is, even if things occur more often, I thought if the word passive sampling occurs a lot, then it will statistically use it a lot. And you're saying that's not the case.
I don't think it is.
That's surprising. Isn't that a flaw?
I'm not sure. I mean, large language models, they look at all the text data and they try to predict the next words. And in this case, I guess it is trying to come up with a deep dive discussion. Let's think of it. It's generating the script. And listeners, don't quote me on this. This is just me logically thinking it through from what I know. But I believe it would receive all this text data and it would read the request, which is the prompt, and probably some other predefined prompt that is inbuilt, saying it has to generate this podcast episode with certain instructions. And then it would have all this text data. And then based on that, it would have to then try and come up with a script, infilling every word in sequence based on all the information it has until it has the full podcast script, which it then converts into voices.
But then if words in this long list of words occur a lot, then wouldn't you expect the likelihood of occurrence in the podcast would be higher?
You'd think it would.
Right.
But that's the uncertainty about large language models, deep neural networks. At the surface, we know how they're built, but the inner workings of it, the parameters of it, there's billions and billions of parameters. It's hard to then, sort of follow up why you have a certain result.
That's pretty, in a way, dangerous, as you said, because then it might stress things as important that are not important.
Yeah. And so that's where the human role is still extremely important. And I think this should also serve as an important message. I think listeners, when you encounter podcasts that use NotebookLM, always look out for scrutiny. If the hosts themselves curate the content and double check the content and ensure that the content is actually communicating the message that they wanted to communicate and that it accurately reflects the sources that is given to the large language model.
I agree.
Yep.
I think that's a great word for you for the end.
Yes, Lena. Sorry it's disappointed you. I don't think it met a lot of the expectations, but it certainly highlighted a very important aspect about using such tools And I think if we had gone through several generations, then we might have had an alternative version where it focuses a lot more on you. But I think that's also a very important lesson for everyone to learn when using AI tools. Always be careful about what you receive and look at it with a fresh dose of skepticism.
Totally. I really hoped it would paint me as this amazing person.
It did.
I don't know. Did it? I'm a researcher, so I'm rather unhappy with the outcome.
But nevertheless, I think sometimes the message you paint in the end can be much more important than the message you were hoping for in the first place.
I guess I'm
trying to cheer you up. I think I'm
happy.
Spectacular at this. But nevertheless, thanks for joining me in this little experiment. I think we had a bit of fun, especially at the end, pulling our hair out.
I mean, you saw my face, right? I was not so happy anymore. It was really like, oh, come on, stop this. And thank you also for actually planning this experiment. I think it's really good that we do this and that we learn about the tools.
Agreed, definitely. And yeah, dear listeners as well, thank you very much for joining in yet again to this special mini-series. And if you're interested in using the tool itself, you can go check it out, play with it, but I think look at it with a fresh dose of skepticism and also be careful about the outputs that you get from this and any AI tool. Either way, more information about this episode in the show notes, as well as all of Lena's papers and all the content that she's achieved. Do check out her main episode as well to listen to the full story. And stay tuned for new episodes of this mini-series, as well as regular episodes on the Grand Challenges podcast.
If you like this episode or the show in general, follow it on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts from to be notified of the latest release as soon as it becomes available. Check out the show notes and many other episodes over at petermbach.com/podcast or join the LinkedIn group and share your thoughts.
The podcast's intro and outro song for this mini-series is called Funky Fortune by Danny Shields.
Stay tuned for our next episode in this mini-series to find out more about how AI may or may not tackle the grand challenges